The Super Bowl is this weekend. For the second year in a row, Joe Biden will not be doing an interview. Now, I talked about this yesterday, but in light of this audio, you got to consider it in light of this audio. The President of the United States is not up to handling an interview before the Super Bowl. He's not up for much. This is not a good or compelling thing that the President of the United States is struggling to answer basic questions.
There is some movement, and I don't want to, well, maybe choose my words. There's some movement. There's been a response from there's been a response from the opposition, but yes, I'm sorry, from Hamas, but it seems to be a little over the top. We're not sure where it is. There's a continuing negotiation right now.
That's not good. You know, the Donald Trump of today is not the Donald Trump of 2016 or the Donald Trump of 2020, but he's still outperforming Joe Biden on the stage, unscripted, unguarded, unchecked, without a teleprompter. Joe Biden of today is not the Joe Biden of 5 weeks ago, is not the Joe Biden of last year, is not the Joe Biden of 2020, is certainly not the Joe Biden of 2016, and it's for all the world to see and show. It's remarkable. It is remarkable that this is happening. It is remarkable that we have gotten this far. It is remarkable that Joe Biden is unable to answer coherently basic questions. Donald Trump got Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi mixed up. Now, what I find very funny here, by the way, is that a number of Trump supporters have come forward and said, actually, it was on purpose. Nobody caught his subtlety, but actually it was the genius of Donald Trump. It really was on purpose. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. He's gotten Barack Obama and Joe Biden confused. He's gotten Nancy Pelosi and Nikki Haley confused. People do it. It's not a big deal. He did not confuse the living president of France for the dead president of France and then attribute the dead president of France to being the president of Germany. That's what Joe Biden did. Just roll with it. Accept it. They're both 80-year-olds. They do this. You do this with your kids. It's not some five-dimensional outer space chess on Donald Trump's part. It's just age and brain, and it's still better than Joe Biden. Joe Biden literally mixed up the living president of France with the long-dead president of France and then claimed that the long-dead president of France was the living president of Germany, who has a chancellor, by the way, not a president in charge. Donald Trump has led Joe Biden in 9 of the last 12 polls. He historically overperforms his polling, and he's ahead in major polls from CNN and NBC, both of whom had good track records in 2022. Sean Trende has an analysis of why Joe Biden is so unpopular. And it is the economy. 2 reasons, he says. Yes, it is the economy. But also, more than that, they care about things ranging from war in the Middle East to their perception of the president. And the more Joe Biden shows up and speaks, the more his age matters to people. And I would add, and who is the alternative to Joe Biden? A woman whose polling is so terrible, she makes syphilis and serial killers look popular compared to her. Kamala Harris is a non-starter for most people. Sure, we're 9 months from the election, but people's perceptions have been baked in of Joe Biden ever since he surrendered Afghanistan to the Taliban. But it's not just that. Here comes Gallup today. The Republican and Democratic parties have distinctive strengths with different subgroups of the U.S. population. However, Democrats have lost ground among some of their traditionally stronger support groups while gaining ground with others. This is based on an analysis of America's party preference, which includes those who identify as Democratic or Republican and those who are independent but lean towards a party. The Democratic Party's wide lead over Republicans and Black American Party preference has shrunk by 20 points over the last 3 years. The Democrats' lead among Hispanic adults and adults aged 18 to 29 have slid nearly as much, resulting in Democrats holding only a modest edge among both groups. Whereas Democrats were at parity with Republicans among men as recently as 2009 and among non-college educated adults as recently as 2019, They're now in the red with both groups. Only partially offsetting those trends, the Democrats have gained adherents long-term among college-educated Americans, those with post-grad education and those with a college degree only. But it's not enough to offset the loss. The media oftentimes talks about the Republicans' problem with women. The Republicans have a huge problem with women. The Republicans, they can't get women. And really, when you look at the data, it is more often than not single women. It's not married women. Married white women, in particular, still tend to lean Republican. Married Hispanic women have trended towards the GOP. Younger married black women have too, if they're in suburban settings, but in urban settings are not. Why? Social issues versus jobs. The Democrats don't have a woman problem. Republicans do. But you know who the Democrats have a problem with? Men. The Democrats have a pretty startling problem now with men. Women lean Democrat 49-40, 9-point gap. 49% of women say they are Democrat, 40% say they're Republican. But what about the men? Republicans beat Democrats by 15 points with men. 52% to 37%. What about American adults right now? All American adults? According to Gallup, it's 45% identify as Republican, 43% identify as Democrat. In fact, if you look at the NBC News poll, if you look at the CNN poll, you look at Gallup's data, majority of Americans want Republicans to hold Congress. Even as they don't like Trump, they like Biden even less. And when you dig into the data, when you probe the data to find out why, a lot of it has to do with age and the fallback being Kamala Harris. I can't emphasize this enough. I can't say it enough. I can't repeat it enough. You must hear it, digest it, process it, know it. For all of the belly aching of the Democratic Party claiming that Donald Trump is an existential threat to the American Republic, they would not be running Joe Biden and Kamala Harris if they truly believed it. If they truly believe Donald Trump is a threat to our democracy, they would not be running Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Two of the most unpopular national politicians. Kamala Harris is the most unpopular national politician in America. The data and trend lines will undoubtedly shift over the next 9 months. Incumbency has its advantages. Yeah, I still think, despite the conventional wisdom in the press right now, the conventional wisdom is so often wrong. I still think by virtue of being the incumbent president of the United States, with an economy that is improving, and it actually objectively is, even if you don't feel it yet, Biden has some latent advantages by being an incumbent president with an improving economy. But Donald Trump outperforms his polling all the time. And he's leading in the polling right now with media institutions that hate him. The people who are still raw about Trump winning the primary, the DeSantis team, the Haley team, they're like, well, it's all a trap. The polls are obviously going to shift. Well, yeah, I do think they're obviously going to shift, not because the media has been spinning and laying a trap, but because as both candidates are more and more exposed, it will remind people of the deficiencies of each. The only one who's overexposed right now is Joe Biden, who by being president is forced to speak publicly in ways Donald Trump isn't. As Trump's stature elevates and they cover him more and more what he's saying, not just court cases and things like that, but actually putting him on TV, there will be changes. And yes, the Trump team is running out of money, and Trump personally is being wiped out financially by the courts. And you do need money to win. There are strategic, fundamental problems with Trump as the GOP nominee, but there are strategic, fundamental problems with Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee. And the Democrats are exuding confidence over a guy who's not at war with Iran, but is at war with the English language. Joe Biden is a deeply flawed candidate for office. The bravado of the Democrats on television and the bravado of the Democrats in public on how they're so happy that Donald Trump is the Republican presidential nominee. We have seen this all before, not in 2020, but in 2016. Look what happened in 2016. I'm sure they'll blame the Russians again. They'll never blame the candidate. Maybe this time they'll blame China. They'll blame some other entity. They'll never accept that Trump won if he wins. But I'm just going to say it again, and it bears repeating on a regular basis. Just as you can't take Democrats' claims on climate change seriously when they're always jetting around the place in private jets, you cannot take the Democrats' claim seriously that Trump is a threat to this republic when they're putting up Biden and Harris as their nominees. If Donald Trump were truly a threat to our democracy, the Democrats would not be putting up those two people for their nominees, and yet they are. So we can presume that their statements about Trump are fear-mongering to raise money and not actually serious.